That.
We are. It's been a little while.
Welcome, everyone. It's Intelligent Disclosure Time. I'm Richard Dolan, and my wife. I was going to say something nice and complimentary. You don't always like that. My wife, Tracey.
Hi, everybody.
So here we are. We've got an interesting program for you. This actually follows a theme that we've been working actually a lot of the stuff together. We talk about these things in our own time. Mm-hmm. That is predecessor cases that are similar to the Tic Tac UFO. It's actually a really interesting thing.
I'm building my arsenal of favorite cases.
Yeah, you are. And honestly, so we're going to do two cases tonight. Mm-hmm. I'm going to take the lead probably on the first of them. They're both interesting. And then we'll probably do the second one together. You've put a lot of work into this one as well.
Well, I mean, it's more curiosity when you start digging into these, right? And you start seeing the patterns, the patterns with the Tic Tac UFO, but patterns amongst Air Force bases, for example, they just get more and more interesting the deeper you go. So
what's interesting for me, because I've studied these cases in many cases for more than 2 decades, but you haven't. Right. You've got you've thrown yourself into a lot of these cases now, and you've got a different perspective. Like it's a fresh perspective, really. Mm-hmm. I think when someone studies this for such a long time, I don't want to say you can get jaded, but you can get almost like ho hum, like, oh yeah, another great UFO case where this thing's like zigzagging and instantly accelerating. So I think it's really helpful for all of us when we're looking at these cases to have a fresh approach. I think, and you do.
Oh, well, thank you.
You do, because it's...
Well, I just think it's good sometimes, and I know I say this a lot, but it's true. There are new people getting interested in this. I mean, we have all of this new information out that's going pretty mainstream with Unidentified, the show, whatever you think about it. I mean, so many shows on History Channel, sci-fi, everything. There's a huge influence from UFOs these days in this whole community. So lots of people are getting interested who weren't interested before, wondering, before it was just science fiction, but now it's becoming more a reality and people are looking for information. So I think sometimes it's good when you have someone who's newer to pull back and go, okay, what does that mean? I don't understand.
No,
that.
Absolutely.
Because we want to understand, but we have the most amazing people here who are veterans in this. And,
right, but there's always new people too.
Yeah, there's always new people. So,
and I just want to say, we were talking. Actually, you and I both forgot that we did a show earlier in the summer on predecessors of the Tic Tac UFO case. That was mostly research that I did, but we worked on it together. And we wanted to do this again this week, and we both forgot. It was actually August 6th on YouTube. Go check it out. It was a good show, and we worked off of a lot of early declassified documents. Mm-hmm. Oak Ridge in 1953, which is a heck of a case, and a number of others. The one that I love talking about, from the Canadian National Archives, the case from 1936 at Aylmer Lake. We did discuss it. I got into it with a lot of graphics and detail. It's an amazing case. You want to talk about a Tic Tac, just very briefly. Mm-hmm. That thing was described as basically slightly elongated, no markings whatsoever, middle of absolutely nowhere. This man was doing aerial reconnaissance work for the Canadian government. He had an aircraft that could fly over the middle of nowhere in Northwest Territory. And he's doing a pre-flight check. He looks up and sees this thing above him, and it rotates and instantly zooms off. In 1936. It's just breathtaking. Now, he's a sole witness.
Right. It was completely stationary, and then it took off, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's what you see with the Tic Tac UFO.
That's what you see with all of these cases. So sometimes it's not just the shape of the object. Oftentimes it's these other extraordinary attributes, right?
Exactly. Someone's actually writing what power plant are on these things, and we're not going to get into that tonight, but that's a really important question. And what is it that allows these things to go? And for the record, U.S. analysts, and I'm sure Russian analysts and everyone else have asked themselves, how do these things do the things they do? We'll have to cover that on another show. Before we get into that, did you want to have a couple of announcements? I think you wanted to mention couple of things.
Yeah, I just want to mention, I know we haven't been live in a while, so hi, everybody. We are going to be traveling again this Friday. So we have UFO cruise. If any of you are going to be going on that, we'll see you. But because of that, our shows are going to be a little bit, we have some that are scheduled, but they won't be live. They'll
Maybe
be
spotty.
They'll be pre-recorded for you, but they will be new. They will all be new. So if you want to follow along and you're not already subscribed, that's one good way to do it. And you turn on notifications, and then you will get the notification when we upload something. So, but we will, I think, Pursuing X has a plan to upload something that we just recorded next Tuesday in place of this show.
That'll be fun. Well, can we just mention what it is?
Yes.
So I did an interview a week ago with Jimmy Church on Fade to Black, and that you can listen to it. The audio is fully available on his channel right now, and it was a good interview. Mm-hmm. They always are. Jimmy has a good way of bringing things out of me.
Yeah, you guys have fun. You get into it.
But what you did, we were away. We were at
my mom's.
at your mother's in Canada, and you recorded me on video.
Yeah, I just thought, why not? I'm going to record him. Let's just see what he does.
So on
the commercials,
on Jimmy's audio, you just get the official stuff. You had me between the breaks.
Yes.
Where at one point I captured a fruit fly in my wine glass, as I recall. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And I tried showing you.
Uh-huh.
That's all on camera. But there was a lot of other things we discussed in between, and I think it was interesting.
Right? I can't even remember them all, but I hope it's fine. But anyhow, Pursuing X thought it was hilarious, so I guess we're going to put it up.
It was. Oh, speaking, I just want to mention this other thing. So last week when we were in Toronto, we met up with Grant Cameron.
We did. All
right, so that's now on YouTube. And that was a little crazy because that was recorded by someone else, but you recorded roughly 20 minutes worth.
Right.
And we put that up first.
Right. So we tried to do a couple things. We recorded, we tried to do live. And if any of you tuned in for that, we're sorry. It was buffering a lot.
Yeah, we
tried to get the very best internet. We did get the very best internet, and still it wasn't very good. So there's a couple of format. I just wanted to give everyone a peek into what was going on, because we were doing another back room sort of unplugged with Richard and Grant, which is always fun. So I took 20 minutes. When that didn't work out, I took 20 minutes, but that went up on the on our website.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to say, so the individual who recorded it came out in two parts, which wasn't sure why, but that's fine. They're both out there now. And, whenever I get together with Grant, it's always a trip, because that man is on fire every time we get together.
Yes.
But one person made a comment.
I know you're going to say it's so funny. We read it last night. It was so funny.
He said, play Richard and Grant at 3/4 speed. He said, Grant sounds normal and Richard sounds like he's hammered.
So we did, and it did.
But actually, I thought we both sounded hammered, frankly.
Yeah, I thought Grant did.
Just as much as me.
It was funny. If you want to laugh, you can check it out.
But it's also a great conversation. Grant and I got into a lot of the current issues that are affecting ufology, and I would encourage you to check out parts 1 and 2. They're also on Grant's channel. We put them on both of our channels, so you can go there and you can go here.
Mm-hmm. We try to do this whenever we get the two of them together. Desta and I try to corral them and do one of these sort of fun interviews where they can just sort of be themselves and hang out and discuss all the current issues. So look for more if we have any more conferences coming up in the new year.
Grant is someone that I'm always comfortable talking with him, and it's funny because we see a lot of things exactly the same. We see a few things not exactly the same, but that tension and that dynamic is always interesting when we have our discussions about really whatever it is, and so I'm always enjoying them.
Cool. Well, why don't we jump in?
Sure. So was there anything else you wanted to get into? We got 2 cases we're going to talk about.
We'll talk about it at the end.
All right. Well, I just wanted, so relating to the Tic Tac UFO, which is not the primary subject of our presentation tonight, but I want to mention it because, and rightly so, the Tic Tac has become the major UFO event of the 21st century. in the public's eye particularly, right? It's funny because just a little over 2 years ago, no one practically knew about it,
Right.
but it is very well known now. And again, for absolutely legitimate reasons. It's a military case, so it has national security implications. And by the way, this happened in 2004 off the coast of Southern California, Mexico. The USS Nimitz group, the USS Princeton, were the key ships involved here. This is U.S. Navy personnel encountering a Tic Tac shaped object, estimated about 40 feet in diameter, white, performing unbelievable maneuverability. Yeah.
I was just going to say that's the one they engaged, but there were several others reported, right?
Exactly, for several weeks. You've got excellent witnesses, people like Commander David Fravor, the lead pilot. You've got Kevin Day,
Gary Voorhees.
And there are others as well. In the case of a guy like Kevin, we've been talking about him a lot lately. We did meet him. He's an absolute stand-up guy and knowledgeable. And he was in charge of the radars on a number of occasions, and he tracked these things doing maneuvers they're not supposed to be possible.
Right.
Basically. So you've got it's a military case. You've got great witnesses, including radar. You've got incredible capabilities of the object itself. So for those reasons, the Tic Tac UFO became a famous UFO case, maybe the most famous of our time. It's got an unusual shape that doesn't make sense aerodynamically. Like, how does it fly? There's no wings, there's no rudder, there's no tail. All of the things that you get with classic UFOs, you get with the Tic Tac. The incredible movements, the stationary to incredible speed, measured and estimated, it seems to me, with very consistent accuracy to maybe 10,000 miles per hour, maybe 20,000 miles per hour. Kevin Day famously described how on the radar he tracked that one of the objects descending from 28,000 feet to sea level in 0.78 seconds.
That's right. Something else about that I didn't really catch the first time, but talking about how fast that happened. So not only are they performing these unconventional maneuvers that aren't possible, things like this, Kevin was saying in that instance, that example, what should have happened was we would hear the sonic booms go boom, 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 all the way down.
Oh, right. Exactly.
So there wasn't anything like that. So it's defying those laws as well, And
actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because this also is a major feature of classical UFO sightings going back to the 40s as well. Observers, scientific, military, and civilians as well noticed these things going much faster than the speed of sound, at which, depending on your altitude, roughly 700 miles per hour. And they would make that sonic boom, but not these things.
Right. I didn't realize that. I mean, I guess I knew.
Right.
But I was re-listening to something, and that really stuck with me.
Right. Someone down here saying 500 miles per hour. I think the speed of sound is a bit faster than that. So let's go into two classic cases that have a remarkable number of qualities that are very reminiscent of the Tic Tac UFO case. And the reason I want to do this, we've said this before, I just want to say it again. It's really good that we're discussing contemporary UFO cases, or at least modern. Tic Tac from 2004, the USS Roosevelt case of 2014, 2015. And look, go online to the National UFO Reporting Center. There are thousands of cases, and maybe a couple of hundred are really good ones. Same with MUFON. There's a lot of good contemporary cases, but the thing is with the revitalization of the UFO subject in the public domain, really led by TTSA and with their connections in the media, and that's all fine. But you get this very strong sense that this is all a 21st century phenomenon,
right?
Which is really weird for me, because, I started researching this in the early 90s, looking at all the old history when the official establishment was really just pushing all those cases away.
Right.
And so a lot of us are steeped in those old cases. So with the emphasis of shows like Unidentified, and the media coverage that accompanies that, it's essentially as if, wow, this is a new thing. We don't know what these things are. As if the entire 20th century never happened.
Right.
Like, I know that the folks.
Well,
at
we have
TVS
the other shows too, like Ancient Aliens. So that's going into some of the contemporary cases.
That is true. That's a good point.
And moving backwards. And Hangar One also was sort of doing the same thing. So we keep mentioning Unidentified, but there are several shows out there.
But Unidentified is really a TTSA show, and it's all within the last couple of years. I mean, you've got a good point. Ancient Aliens is still out there.
But people who are joining now, like I think Unidentified is getting numbers interested that have never even seen Ancient Aliens, so it's a relevant point that you're making.
So the thing is, I just would like to remind people, I think the folks listening here don't need this reminder, but nonetheless it's good to remind people that what we are talking about here has been going on for generations, and in fact an entire human lifetime. So when people say, well, we don't know what these things are, you have to understand it's not that they're trying to lie. I don't really think that they are, but I do think that they're trying to position themselves politically within the public eye in a certain way to restart the conversation on UFOs. That's fair. Nonetheless, we are not obligated to simply roll over and forget that all this history happened. Like, we are obligated to remember our history. So to that end, how about we jump in?
Says the historian, of course.
Says the historian. So I'm going to jump in.
I agree.
We're going to add this here. So look, one day we'll do this a little bit better. You have to understand, when we put these together, we get our notes together. I usually will put together the visuals. I put these together today. So this is as good as it's going to get, guys. So this is a case near a Japanese town of Fukuoka, Japan. And you can see it's in the southern part of Japan, just right across from South Korea, near the East China Sea, Sea of Japan. Back in the olden days, they had the USSR, that's the Soviet Union, over in here. And of course, here's China, not even yet under Mao's Communist Party control. This is pre-Chinese Revolution, and we've got this case in October 15th, actually, of 1948. And I really want to get into this. It is a fascinating case. And by the way, I want to thank a gentleman who will just go by the name Kosh. Kosh directed my attention to this case. I should say redirected my attention. This appears in a lot of the old classic UFO books, and I absolutely recall reading about this. But this is a really good case, and I want to treat it like it's fresh here. So where the heck, let me advance the slide here. And there's a closer, this is where Fukuoka is, just across from South Korea. This is all from Google Earth, by the way. And so what you have is on, I guess, patrol. They were out flying. This is an evening north of F-61. These had recently been the P-61s, known as the Black Widow. It's
such an interesting looking craft. It looks like two planes put together.
Yeah, it does. It's it's a great design. And they were a sturdy, really excellent aircraft. I was looking on a website. Here, I can unshare this here for the moment. I was looking at a website about this earlier today, and one author described that aircraft as possibly the best the most underrated aircraft of World War II. It had very strong capabilities. Like a lot of the best fighter planes toward the end of the war, it was over 300 miles per hour. This one could hit more than 360 miles per hour at the end of World War II. And then subsequent versions of it got up to over 400 miles per hour. I don't know the maximum speed of this one, but they were not, during this, they were not flying at anywhere close to their max speed anyway, so probably doesn't matter. But this is the type of aircraft that was involved in the event that I'm going to just go into. And I've got a number of bullet points here I just want to go over. So this was 11 p.m. local time on October 15th. And I got two bullets here. So they encountered this object primarily on radar. They did get visuals of this thing too. So let me talk about the radar first. It had a radar return that was about equivalent to that of an ordinary aircraft. But it was this unknown thing. And they tried on 6 occasions to intercept this thing. So And yeah, the thing is this. So it was a classic cat and mouse encounter. So I'm going to find this with the Rapid City case that we're going to talk about in a little while. Same thing. Every time the radar man got a contact with this, he got it as a target. The pilot tried to close, and this object would just accelerate, sometimes very rapidly, and pass easily out of range. So you hear about this very frequently. This is a statement from the official report. This is a military report. The radar observer estimated that on 3 of the sightings, remember they had 6 encounters with this thing. On 3 of the sightings, the object traveled 7 miles in approximately 20 seconds, giving a speed of approximately 1,200 miles per hour. Now, these guys were flying at, I think, around 200 plus miles per hour, well under their maximum speed. I don't know how hard they went when they really punched it to try to close in on this thing, but this object was going triple their maximum speed on the best possible day. So I think that's really quite significant. Oh yeah, let me go on to the next. So this is more, these are more statements from the report here. By the way, atmospheric physicist James McDonald did his own detailed analysis of this case, and I'll read you a quote from McDonald when we get to the end here. When the F-61 approached within 12,000 feet, the target executed a 180-degree turn and dived under the F-61. Now, what I'm not sure about is how tight that turn was, but when you hear them say 180-degree turn, you certainly get the impression it was a rather tight turn. So that's really quite remarkable. The F-61 attempted to dive with the target, but was unable to keep pace. So right away, you've got this thing making a turn that the best fighter planes in the world, even better than the F-61, could not even think of doing. It dove much more rapidly than the F-61 could attempt to do. They're saying this object could go almost straight up or down out of radar elevation limits. So you've got radar that checks the altitude, and this thing went beyond the upper and apparently the lower limits, straight up and down. You know, anyone out there tell me what can do that? This aircraft seemed to be cognizant of the whereabouts of the F-61 at all times.
This is what a lot of reports say.
Yeah.
I just want to say that.
Right.
They don't know that, but it seems like that. In the other case that we're going to get into, that's something that they also said. It was as though that craft had something on board that was able to tell when something was getting close, and it would react immediately, like within a certain limit.
Yeah, it was uncanny.
Yeah.
Or seemingly uncanny. It was actually smarter than the pilots who were trying to close in on it, is really what it seems like. So I'll just continue and add a little bit more here. I'm glad you mentioned that. Oh yeah, and this is a quote from the pilot. I'll get into him in a minute too. The aircraft immediately outdistanced us. So these types of statements, I think, are useful to keep in mind. The pilot's name, he was a first lieutenant, Oliver Hemphill. And he says here, the third radar target, I should say, was spotted visually by myself. So here's where we get radar plus visual. And I love what he says here. I had an excellent silhouette of the target thrown against a very reflective undercast by a full moon. So you got great visibility, full moon. I realized at this time that it did not look like any type of aircraft I was familiar with. He did describe it. He actually said it looked like a rifle bullet, roughly speaking. And I did a little description here of a rifle. I actually took an image of a rifle bullet and played with it and then chopped off the ends. Look, I'm not very good with Photoshop. And
but it helps. It helps to have any type of visual, I think, for all of us.
Yeah, and I'm not sure it had the kind of point that this is an actual 1940s rifle bullet. It may have been a little more rounded in front. But he says here, it was estimated to be about the size of a fighter aircraft, so ordinary size, but had neither discernible wings nor tail structures. It was somewhat bullet-shaped, tapered toward the rear, but with a square cut aft end. So I'm not sure if I did that right or not. It seemed to have a dark or dull finish. And these are just random pictures of conical or elongated shaped UFOs. We've seen many of these in many instances. So that's the kind of thing that they saw. Again, really not unlike the Tic Tac UFO, this type of a shape. And we don't have we've got a very incredible speed of 1,200 miles per hour. That's quite a bit lower than the Tic Tac's apparent speeds of 10,000 miles per hour or more. But it's still a pretty amazing speed.
Right.
And with amazing maneuverability that
and we have the pilot seeing it, and we have it being tracked on radar.
On the airborne radar. It actually wasn't tracked on the ground-based radar. There was a lot of clutter, apparently, ground clutter, which can happen. But these guys had a very clear vision, tracking of it on their airborne plus the visual.
Got it.
James McDonald, one of the great UFO researchers we've ever had, back in the 1960s, looked at this case with fresh eyes. He was not just a PhD, but his wheelhouse was atmospheric physics. This is really where he excelled in looking at these types of cases. McDonald I just want to say this, was expert at debunking the ridiculously bad explanations of astronomers like people like Donald Menzel, who back in the 50s and 60s was the top debunking UFO researcher, if we can call Menzel that. But
did he overlap with Class?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
They did overlap a bit. So, but the thing about Menzel, unlike Class, Menzel was a PhD astronomer at Harvard. He had a lot of status. And people have this idea that just because you're an astronomer, you're somehow accorded some kind of expertise at UFOs, which to me is a big laugh. Think about that. Like, all right, so you know where the planets are, you know about the stars. So that's one nice advantage. Studying UFOs requires a lot more than that. And actually, where are they mostly seen? In the atmosphere, not out in space. Sometimes, but it's an atmospheric phenomenon frequently. And so McDonald would look at a lot of Menzel's explanations, Menzel as an astronomer, and McDonald just ruthlessly, brutally would just tear them to pieces. But he had science on his side. So this is McDonald. He's looking at this case here, and we're just about done with the Japanese case. The airman stated that no exhaust flames or trail were seen from this object with its stubby, clean lines. The total duration of the 6 attempted intercepts is given as 10 minutes. And he writes, "We deal here with one of many cases wherein radar detection of an unconventional object was supported by visual observation." And yeah, that's about it. Exactly, James McDonald. So I think that's all
and
we've
that's
got
a
here.
super important point when we're talking about things that are sort of paralleling the Nimitz Tic Tac.
Yeah, and in fact,
UFO case.
let's just talk about a few things here with this Fukuoka case one more time before we move on. So you got the shape of the object. It's definitely elongated. I would say
It's in that
similar,
realm.
comparable to the Tic Tac UFO. You've got the incredible maneuverability that the Tic Tac UFO showed back in 2004, and that this object clearly was showing in 1948. Speed,
Right.
remarkable speed.
Right.
Actually, I would almost say for 1948, impossible speed.
Yeah, 1,200 miles an hour.
We didn't have anything that could do that in terms of any kind of aviation. A rocket could, I'm assuming, approach speeds that are like that. But this was not a rocket. This maneuvered. This played all kinds of cat and mouse games. You've got, like with the Nimitz and Princeton encounters, you've got great caliber of witnesses. These individuals were very highly regarded. And I would just ask, like, what conventional explanations can we arrive at here? You know, for me, like with the Tic Tac encounter, it's it's not that there can't be a terrestrial black budget program that does what the Tic Tac did. All right, fine. Let's pretend, and maybe it's true, that this can happen, that there's a black budget program, or maybe the Russians, or like, I absolutely don't believe this, that the Russians did the Tic Tac incident. But let's rewind the clock back to 1948, and now you've got something doing 1,200 miles per hour with unbelievable maneuverability, very similar to the Tic Tac, other than it was a little bit slower. But we don't know what the top speed of this thing could have been anyway. So I don't really have, there's not a good conventional explanation. And by the way, that case, that Japanese case, is a Blue Book unknown. So it's one of the 701 Blue Book unknowns that that are in the record there. So,
and you have very high level people, like you said, James McDonald, coming out and sort of endorsing it as something that is genuinely unknown.
He did a very deep analysis of it, which McDonald, that's how he was. He did deep analyses of a lot of these older cases. He really got, as we've talked about on this program, he got very, very involved in the UFO phenomenon, public in the 60s, and wow, he just threw himself into it. So that was one case. In fact, there are quite a few great cases we could follow up on with other McDonald research.
I saw someone in there saying earlier, why are we not focusing on the Navy? Why are we focusing on these old cases? And you had said, we don't want to forget the history of this. And this is not us this is not us not paying attention to the Navy and what's happening now. What we're basically doing is corroborating it with older cases that are equally mysterious, and they have many similar attributes. So it's, I would have been in the same place if I had just jumped in this a long time ago. I would have said, why are we going into the old files? But now I really see it's important. And back then, like now, things could be Photoshopped, things could be faked, things could be, and now we're like, wondering what is the military doing? What are the black projects? But back then, we're talking about in the 40s. I really see the value myself in looking back with the technology that they had and what they were seeing. And so we're looking at parallels of what's happening and being reported in the Navy now and what was happening back then.
On top of which, we've been talking about the Navy all year. So there's that as well.
No, but I just, when people just join in, they always, why old cases? So I know we've been saying it all along, but sometimes it's good to revisit that.
Well, you have to understand too. I mean, it's my own prejudice. I study the old cases. So if you're going to watch me at all, then you're going to get some old cases. That's just how
I wasn't into the old cases before. I'll be totally honest.
Right.
But I have an appreciation for them now. And when you start to see so many similarities, it's amazing.
So let's go to this place now.
Right.
Rapid City, South Dakota, people. We're talking August 5th, 1953.
That's right.
The big red dot.
Ellsworth Air Force Base.
Right.
This one is super interesting as well because this happened in 1953, and this was the year after Blue Book started. Right. This case was important.
That's right.
Because Ruppelt, who was in charge of Blue Book, felt it was super important. He was personally involved. He interviewed all the people, put the story together, and felt it was important enough to include in his book. And it was one of the cases that was considered, genuinely unidentified.
He felt it was one of the best.
Out of all the Blue Book cases. And Dr. Hynek also wrote about this, right?
Hynek and many other researchers. You were looking at some of the research yourself of Brad Sparks.
I can remember his name. I left what I wrote. I left what I was reading downstairs.
I'm like, well done. You're digging out some Sparks' material.
I gotta say, he is super technical. So I was trying to figure out some of the. I appreciate that, but I was trying to figure out some of the things that he was saying. Because he's talking.
No, well, that's really to your credit. I'm very glad that you're doing that. Here's a picture of Ruppelt, by the way, as if you haven't seen him ever. We've had him on here many, many times. That's a famous picture.
He's got such an interesting story. If you ever want to hear that, we can go back into the files. One of our shows was on him. So, and with the sad end. sad end for him.
So do you want to take the lead on some of this, or we can go back and forth?
So
what do you want to say about this
story,
to start with?
Well, yeah, this story is interesting because it starts with Ruppelt getting a phone call at 2 a.m. in the morning.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
He gets woken up, and it's someone who was a colleague of his, I believe, who was an actual skeptic. And he phones him because he was directed to read what's it called? I have Prime Directive in my head.
It was like a wire that came into
but it was like a high priority report that had come in, and he was so shocked by it. He was calling Ruppelt,
at 2 a.m. waking him up saying,
right, yeah. And so not only that, Ruppelt runs in.
Well, actually, what he said, I just wanted to say this.
Tell him what he said.
Ruppelt in his book described, his name is Max. God, I can't remember his last name now. But he says he's from Louisiana. He's got this slow Southern Louisiana drawl. Everything he says is slow. It's like, well, Ed, I've always been very skeptical of these flying saucer reports. But then really fast, he says, but you got to read this wire. And so Ruppelt's like, wow, okay, that was very significant.
A priority report.
Yeah, it was a priority report. So Ruppelt, go on.
I forget what I was saying.
So he gets this, and he goes down to
Right. Pat, so Ruppelt goes to Right Pat, 2:30 in the morning. He gets there, and all sorts of stuff is going on. Right. Okay. So another really important thing here was that the Pentagon also called Ruppelt at that time in the morning. Correct.
About 2:30, I think he said, roughly speaking.
So we have the Pentagon getting involved. And just in case, did you show them where Rapid City is in South Dakota? Because we're going to start getting into the case, and we want to show everybody sort of where we are.
So let's
talking
just
about
add that. Here's Rapid City.
Okay.
Boom.
Perfect.
Central northern part of the United States. It's very, Rapid City is a decent sized city, but all around here, there is not a lot happening, and that's going to factor into this account.
Okay. So Ruppelt begins to question everyone, and he puts this story together.
Right.
Now, this starts with a woman, right? They're called GOCs, I believe.
Well, she was a GOC spotter, ground observer corps.
Okay, can you maybe explain that to people?
Yeah, let me
because I hadn't heard of that except for in the APRO bulletin.
Right. So what this is an image back in the 1950s during the Cold War. Look at this man. This was a serious thing. So the U.S. military they wanted help from civilians. It's not like they were blanketing the country with satellite imagery. They were not. There was a lot of blind spots, and there was concern, like, what if there was a Russian attack? This is a billboard. Join the Ground Observer Corps. America needs you. Join now. And so the work of these people would be in these parts of the United States. This is 1952. The Ground Observer Corps were volunteer civilians who were spotters, and they were searching the sky. That's exactly what they were doing. And what turns out in the 1950s is that a lot of these GOC spotters famously saw many, many UFOs, as you could imagine. Because the thing is, like, if you're out there as a civilian searching the skies, looking for suspicious aircraft, you're going to see UFOs. And not that they were all legitimate UFOs, but they did see a lot. And many really good UFO cases of the 50s started with a good observation of a ground observer corps personnel.
And
this one did.
Yeah, that's how this case started.
This one did.
There was a woman who was a spotter called Miss Phyllis Killian.
Not Mrs.?
Miss.
Oh, see, I was going off of Ruppelt's description. He had her as a Mrs.
And I was going off of Brad's.
Brad Sparks. So let's go with Sparks.
Okay. Miss Phyllis Killian. So she didn't live on the base. She was about 10 miles west of Ellsworth.
Yeah, in fact, that's
I think the other map really helps to illustrate this.
So you notice this red spot, this is actually Rapid City. Right there, and there's Rapid City. And
okay.
So
there she is. Yeah, she lives in Black Hawk. And
here's Rapid City.
That's right.
This is a modern Google Earth, but the locations are still the same. This is probably larger now, I would assume, than it was in 1953. But otherwise, this is the layout.
Right. So she lives in the town called Blackhawk.
Right.
And she starts to watch this very bright light, and it's very low on the horizon that she notices. It's off to the northeast.
Okay.
Right.
So let me go to the next slide and just show. Now, I was guessing where I think this would be.
This is actually pretty good from what I read as well.
Right.
So, she watches this for a while, and then she decides she's going to call the radar tower or the radar operator at Ellsworth Air Force Base.
Right.
So she was curious if they were picking up something as well. So she calls them, and in fact, they weren't at the time. They had a jet training going on to the west,
and somewhere out in this area. I really don't know how far. Maybe it was west even of the city, for all we know. I'm not sure how far.
It sounds like the
was.
description is west of the base. So then they turn their radar and they look in the direction that she's talking about.
So she's on the phone with them at some point.
She is on the phone.
She says, go to the northeast, and they go somewhere in the northeast. And
okay, so then they end up seeing something. The radar person, the radar operator, studies this intensely, and they said that it was well-defined, solid, and bright. And I think it's important that we talk about why that is important, that they were able to say that.
I absolutely think this is important because there's a lot of radar returns that can be uncertain. I mean, weather can affect radar, absolutely, and it's famously so. And weather has been used as explanations to debunk many UFO sightings that were tracked on radar. Happens so frequently. But when you get a very clear, well-defined, solid return, it's very difficult and really not realistic to expect that that's a weather explanation. So the more solid and well-defined the return is, the more confident you can be that it's not weather. Right.
Well, what I read as well, that initially there was something else. It wasn't as easy to see, but eventually this is what they got. They were able to sort of really get something solid and bright. So
this is still a layout. We got the UFO here.
That's right. So she's describing that it's moving very, very slowly. It seems to be at an altitude of about 16,000 feet.
Right.
And I think here, a lot of people know the relevance of and the context of 16,000 feet, but for people who don't, compared to other aircraft, can we just talk about where commercial aircraft would be and what would be?
16,000.
Is that unusual? Is that
no?
usual?
That's a reasonable altitude for an aircraft to be at that time, particularly. I mean, nowadays the commercial aircraft are going to be flying quite a bit higher. I think it was in the 1950s that you start getting pressurized cabins. So, and what that meant is, like, prior to that, you really couldn't practically fly above, say, 10,000 feet.
Right.
You just couldn't handle it. So you had to stay below that. But by the 50s, they were getting higher. Even commercial aircraft were able to do that. So, I mean, I think it's about 3 miles up. That's a very not an unusual altitude. There certainly were aircraft that were going higher than that as well.
Okay. So let's see. This is important at this point because here we have a spotter and she's able to confirm this with radar, right? Oh, perfect.
There we
go. And then, so what happens next?
So she's talking, so they're talking together and she's like saying, oh, this is when it starts to move.
This is when it starts to move. And she's able to confirm with him that it starts to move.
Right. And it starts to move rapidly.
Right.
That's the thing about
this. And so
this.
what he does is he sends 3 Air Force personnel outside to go and visually look at it. And they are able to confirm it. And they're all able to coordinate and corroborate each other's story. They're all seeing the same thing, moving in the same direction at roughly the same speed. So here you've got multiple witnesses viewing it from, different vantage points with different methods, and they're all getting the same thing. So they're able to confirm this.
You got one person tracking on a radar. You've got 3, 4 people actually watching it from the ground.
Yeah.
Ruppelt wrote
But
3,
different
but there's-
places. Yeah.
apparently there's another one.
Brad.
So you've got 4 people watching this, and with a very high level of corroboration.
Right.
Like I would say almost an exact corroboration from all of these witnesses.
She was and she's a civilian spotter, but they are trained observers. You know, they are Air Force personnel.
Right.
So we have to, we need to take that seriously, obviously.
So what happens here is this. So this object starts moving rapidly. I don't know how rapidly. The one frustrating thing about this case is that I don't think anyone's got actual mile per hour estimates of this object. But as you're going to see, it does some very unusual things. And it, according to the observations of everyone here, it moved rather rapidly in some fashion toward Rapid City. Like that we know. And then it does this. It does, I couldn't really do a good graphic. It does a wide circle around the city. And then it returns back to its original position in the sky. Now, I just want to stop here and take a quick break. So you've got an object that was originally stationary.
That's right.
All right.
I don't know if we even said that, but it was stationary originally. Yeah.
It was stationary. She's noticing it's just unusually bright. What is it doing there? She contacts Ellis Ellsworth Air Force Base, and they track it on their radar. They get their ground-based people to see the thing. They're all watching it. So it starts from motionless. It moves fairly rapidly toward the city, toward Rapid City, circles around the city rapidly in some kind of swift manner, according to the witnesses, and then goes back to its original position. To me, that's an amazing thing.
Okay, so then they go to scrambled jets. So they go to...
Well, I just want to say there was one guy, Ruppelt, was doing interviews in this, and at that point there was an Air Force personnel that it was a master sergeant. Ruppelt had talked to him, and apparently this guy had seen all kinds of combat in Europe and in Korea, and he says, was never so completely awed by anything. He said, the warrant officer who was running everything at the moment, the control tower, is yelling at him and says, what do you think we should do? This guy says to Ruppelt, what in hell could we do? They're bigger than all of us. And they, I think he's assuming not the Russians.
Right.
No, I don't think anyone was ever assuming this was the Russians.
Right.
Although I guess I would just mention Hynek in his book. I was reading some of his comments on this, and he just did want to remind people that in 1953, this was something that you would potentially have to deal. Your first instinct is to wonder, is this the Russians? Is this the Soviets?
Right.
But I think once everyone was on the scene, they realized, no way. No way. So anyway, what happens after this? So
they go to scramble a jet.
They scramble, yeah.
Okay. Some interesting things. And I actually have some conflicting information here when they do scramble a jet. So they scramble a pilot.
So I'm going to show you, this is an F-84 Thunder jet right here. Cool looking aircraft. And what did you want to say?
So the officer in charge called to the pilot who was west of the base and told him to get ready for an intercept.
Right.
Okay. He guided the pilot toward the object,
right,
which was still at an altitude of 16,000 feet. The pilot approaches. The pilot is able to see the object, which he describes as a light, as they all did. She described it as a light that was changing colors.
You're talking about Phyllis Killian,
Phyllis, the spotter. And now he is describing it the same way as a super bright light.
White and bluish white, as I recall.
That's right, but it was changing.
And very bright.
She actually described it as reddish changing to green, which is interesting to me when, I'm listening to all these different cases and I'm paying a lot of attention to the colors that are being reported on the bases, just to hear the similarities. And so this comes up again and again. And someday I hope someone has a database of this, honestly, because some of them really report similar things with the lights and how they change in the colors.
Oh, database of the lights of how
yeah, some of the attributes like that, would be really great to track. Somebody must do that. So let's see. So this is when he gets about 3 miles from it.
Okay, so he's closing in on it.
He's closing in on it. He's engaging it.
Right.
But he can't get any closer than that. It's almost like when, as we were saying before, as soon as he gets to that point of 3 miles, they describe it this way. We are not describing it this way. They do.
I just want to say this first time, as far as we can tell, it wasn't in motion when he started to go after it, started to close on it. So when he gets to within 3 miles, which is incredibly close, I don't know what his closing speed was, but we're talking a couple hundred miles per hour, I'm sure. That's when it starts to move.
This was an F-84, right? You showed that already.
Yeah.
Okay. But what I was about to say was, these are not our words. These are their words that it seemed to be intelligent. Like whenever they would get within this 3 mile range, it would seem to move. So I wish I had the quote on that.
Well, I just want to say,
let me just see if I do.
While you're looking for that, when that thing started moving, everyone else noticed it moving. So the radar people noticed it move.
That's right.
Phyllis Killian saw it move.
That's right.
The guys on the ground saw it move.
I'm just confirming
and they
that,
all saw it move at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So they're all obviously seeing the same object. So again, I just want to ask myself, you should ask yourself, what can do this? It goes, I mean, there are helicopters, but there's no way a helicopter is going to outperform an F-84 Thunderjet on an intercept of it. Like, not a chance.
That's right.
So what happens was this thing picks up speed and it starts going fast.
It starts going fast and it starts going far.
Yeah.
So the radar is tracking it. They go, 120 miles north, I think, until the radar can't track it anymore. And the pilot is running out of fuel. So the pilot decides that he's got to turn around.
Well, yeah. So just like stop and visualize this. So they're going very far north. Yeah, they go up 120.
South Dakota here. So
there's
the middle of.
It's very sparsely populated then and now, actually. But 120 miles north of Rapid City, you're getting toward the border with North Dakota.
Mm-hmm.
And this pilot was getting a little nervous.
Mm-hmm.
He'd already been flying around previously. He was now low on fuel.
Right.
And he's thinking, I'm 120 miles from the base. It's pitch black. I'm chasing a UFO. Not a good situation. He actually was very uncomfortable about that. But his fuel situation was what needed. It precipitated him turning around.
That's right.
So he comes back. Let's keep going here.
Here's what I was talking about before.
Oh,
these are Ruppelt's words. That it was just as if this is about the 3 mile limit.
Oh, right.
That it was just as if the UFO had some kind of an automatic warning radar linked to its power supply.
Good. I'm glad you mentioned that.
When someone got too close to it, it would automatically pick up speed and pull away. The separation distance always remained about 3 miles. So it's just kind of interesting, right?
That's like an automated system, almost as if like that it had sensors, I don't know, on its own craft.
Yeah, who knows?
That would detect, that would kind of regulate that distance. That's what it would sound like. It would not let that.
When I was first reading it, I thought, well, if it was being piloted, it gets close enough, it moves away. But they seem to be tracking it at this exact, whenever they couldn't catch it, but whenever they would engage that sort of wall of 3 miles, it would move. So,
he comes back.
Yes, he does. And all the other pilots are listening in on this, right?
Before we get to that, so they go off the radar scope because he's so far north of the base. Radar doesn't cover as far as 120 miles. So they're both off the radar. Then he turns around and the radar picks him up. And then 10 or 15 miles after him, they pick up the object again, which is now
that's right. It's
following him back.
Yeah.
And in fact, Ruppelt talked to this guy after he talked to everyone. And this guy said, Ruppelt wrote something like, and when I talked to him, he said he was damn glad that he was running out of fuel because being out over some desolate country alone with a UFO can get you worried. So he comes back.
This reminds me of the Iranian case. I am fascinated by the Iranian case.
The 1976.
Yeah, Jafari was the pilot, and he's been on a lot of shows and in a lot of documentaries. Right. But this is something that happened as well. They went and engaged the object, but then the object followed
that's a really good catch. Like this has a lot of similarities
It does.
with the 1976 Tehran
does.
UFO. Yeah,
It does.
Absolutely.
These are happening
Very
same time
similar.
of day. Okay. That's interesting that a lot of them are at 11 p.m. or later.
Well, it's easier to snoop around.
Well,
Of course,
true.
I guess unless you're being super bright in the sky, which both of those UFOs.
But it also makes me wonder, because you mentioned something that Michael Schratt said one time, that there were, and I haven't listened to all of it, but that there was testing of new craft going on a certain day of the week at a certain time. So whenever I see these reports at 11 p.m., I just wonder about that. I just wonder, that's something that we should consider. Was he saying it was on I remember you telling me that I had heard it was a specific day of the week.
I think we were talking about Area 51 in that particular case, but I really like this point of yours. Like, we don't know. It's been how many years since 1948? 70 years? Is it 70, 71 years? Is that right? My God. It's been all this time. And we actually don't have any clue about what this, like if this was a test of something, we don't know what it is.
Right.
Like, I mean, I think it's a great idea. Like, we should always be asking these questions.
Well, we don't know what it is, but also all of these people in the Navy they don't know what it is. And then the military and the radar operators who are supposed to be able to identify all of the craft and, keep their own personnel safe. And then keep everybody else, all the civilians safe. If they don't know, we really have to be paying attention to this.
Yeah, it's a great danger.
Right.
So you want to get to the pilots who are listening in. So the F-84 comes into land.
Yeah.
But as you're about to point out, this is actually really an interesting and part of the story.
Yeah, one of the pilots is thinking, "Are you kidding me?
Well,
UFO."
no, we've got a squadron of pilots listening in.
Yes.
And one of those pilots are like, "Come on."
Yeah.
Seriously.
Give me a break.
UFO. Flying saucers.
I want to go up there and I want to see for myself. And they're like, okay, go.
The traffic controller says,
go check it out. I'll guide you to it. And they do.
He gets into an F-84 immediately. There was one that was ready to go, within a minute or two, and he's up in the air. So there's no time lost.
And he sees it. He gets a visual on it. And I think they guide him to it, and then he gets a visual on it. And so, because this guy didn't believe it right away. So he went through and did several tests to see, he thought, could this be a reflection off my plane? So he turns off the lights on his plane, and it's not, it's not.
It was still there.
Okay. So then he thinks, could this be a reflection from the city? So he actually rolled the plane to see if it was a reflection from the city. And it was not. It was still there. He turns off his lights, right? Turns off his lights and nothing. And then
and he also judged it on the basis of the stars.
That's right. He thought, could it be a star? Because this is how they're all describing it, as this ultra bright light, much brighter than a star. So he wants to test that. And so he fixes on 3 stars, and no, this is moving absolutely independently. So he was trying to debunk it himself, but he was unable to.
And finally, he actually turned his radar on. So
that's right.
His airborne radar was not on, and he said, if this is real and solid, I should pick it up. He turned his radar on, and within seconds, he picked it up.
Yeah.
And actually, that's at the point where he got scared.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, as he's chasing this object, because he, like the previous pilot, cannot get closer than 3 miles.
Right.
He keeps closing and is playing the exact same cat and mouse game with him. And at one point, he said it was about 30 degrees above his eyesight level, and then it dropped. And he tried to nose down to pick up speed to close on it. And he was just completely unable to. He could not.
Yeah, I wish I had Brad's report in front of me, because in one of the encounters, it's described a little bit differently, where it implies that the craft jumped. It was there, and then it was there.
That's interesting.
Okay. It was almost as though it disappeared and then it was below. So it was performing completely unconventional maneuvers.
Well, I mean, if that's the case, I don't know if we're ever really going to be able to figure that out. But it obviously, by any of the reports, was easily outperforming these fighter jets.
Yeah.
That were.
And again, back to the Iranian case, I just think this is such a good case. the pilot said, he's going at hypersonic speeds here. No. He's going at the speed of sound almost, right? And
hypersonic.
the bright light.
Not hypersonic.
No, sorry, I mixed that up. Sorry. The other craft, the unidentified craft, is circling around him at hypersonic speeds. It's it's absolutely outperforming him.
In this case?
No, in the Iranian case.
Oh.
I'm just bringing in some similarities because there are so many similarities with that case.
I'm not sure if I would. Did you actually specifically remember seeing hypersonic? Because I would want to be careful about that statement. That's a super, super fast speed. This
is what Jafari was saying. He was saying basically it could go from one side of his vision to the other side of his vision in a second, like boop.
Well, all right, then I'm going to stand corrected. And thank you to Jafari, but thank you mainly.
Well, it's just interesting, right?
At first, I thought we were talking about the Rapid City case. But
we are, but I'm just bringing this in because they were engaged. The pilots were engaging it, and it was clearly outperforming them.
Yeah.
But in the Iranian case, they were also it also disabled their weapons and disabled their comms.
Yeah.
That's an additional feature that happened in that one.
Absolutely.
But yeah.
So basically, wrapping up here with the Rapid City case, at that point, that second pilot, he turns on his radar, he sees this as a real thing. He gets scared, and he actually requested to break off the intercept at that point. Yeah. You kind of feel sorry for this guy, and he does break it off. And he, again, told Ruppelt, he said, look, I flew over Germany during World War II. I flew over Korea during the war there.
Yeah.
And he said, I had a lot of experiences with enemy aircraft, including MiG-15s. Some of the best German Messerschmitt aircraft. He said, I was never more frightened than I was with this encounter. This was the most scary to him.
Yeah.
So anyway, just to wrap this up, the object kept going in the direction toward Fargo. I just want to show you where Fargo is here on the map. So here's Rapid City. Fargo's right at the Minnesota border. It's in North Dakota. It's about 350 miles as the crow flies, roughly speaking. And you can see that. So what ended up happening, quite simply, is that the object goes off in that general direction, and the folks at Ellsworth call the ground observer. They called it a filter, or the spotters in Fargo. And at first they said, no, we don't see anything here. And a few minutes later, Fargo ground observer called Ellsworth back and said, oh, yeah, there's objects over to our, I think, south, going in a southwest to northeast line.
Mm-hmm.
And it was described as bluish, white, bright, fast-moving object. And I think that's the last that we've heard of it. So that's the case. It's a heck of a case.
Just want to see if we have anything else from that
case. The Condon Committee tried to talk about this.
What happened?
So they said, yeah, these guys are just chasing after stars. They missed the astronomical explanation.
That's right.
And, McDonald, I don't have his statement on it here, but James McDonald looked into that, and he just almost called it absurd. He said a ridiculous explanation for all kinds of reasons. Aside from the fact that you've got, all of the detail that we just went through.
Right. So first of all, you don't trust your pilots, and you don't trust your radar operators, and you don't trust the equipment that you've given to them to use and how you've trained them.
No, right. Exactly. Mm-hmm. But aside from that, very clear visual descriptions from everyone involved. I suppose, though, if you really have to debunk every single thing, like you have to just say, people don't know what they're looking at, and people make mistakes all the time. And that's really what, it's one thing to be a skeptic.
But they chased the star. I just want to say it.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
The supposed star.
But it's another thing just to reflexively debunk every single thing, because as Alan Hynek always put it, he says, their attitude is, it can't be, therefore it isn't. And everything follows from that.
Right.
But no, I love the Rapid City case. I think it's a fantastic UFO incident. And I'm glad we went through it.
Yeah, any cases like that are so important, I think, that have so many different witnesses from so many different vantage points.
Right. Absolutely.
those are the ones we really need to pay attention to.
So there was a few other cases I wanted to get into tonight. We just didn't have time. There was a Gulf of Mexico case from 1952. I will definitely want to come back to that. That was one that came to Donald Kehoe back in late 52. That was the year of the UFO in the United States. And Donald Kehoe was deeply involved in getting these reports. At one point, his contacts in the military, in the Air Force, were able to declassify about 50 cases of UFOs just for Kehoe. And some of these were amazing cases, and I wanted to go into one of them tonight, but we can do that another time.
Okay, let's see. Oh, wow. What? It's 9:05 already?
We've been going for quite a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why don't we take a couple questions, and then we can continue on this one again
we'll pick this up
another part.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we can, continue to talk about these cases that have these amazing hallmarks,
Yes, I think we really should. And again, just to remind everyone in the room here, this is a long-standing phenomenon and a very well-attested one, a very well-attested phenomenon in many. There's a lot of weak UFO cases, but there's a lot of good ones. And I think both of these that we discussed tonight are really good ones. So is there any questions that we wanted?
I'm trying to blow it up.
Have they been filtered for us?
Not blow it up. Okay, so.
Mr. Dolan, why can't the U.S. get to a Cometa report on those public incidents like the French did 2 decades ago, back in 1999? Yeah, Cometa was a very, very well done French report. It was quasi-government report by France. So you had a lot of government officials, ex-government officials, but very highly placed individuals within French political and military society. And they, under the organization known as GEPAN, put together a very detailed, very scientific, very sober, but very brave report on French UFO cases.
Wow.
It's a heck of a good report, yeah. And I think, that would be a great thing that we would have in the United States. I think we could use it. In other words, what would make an American equivalent of that would be to have people associated with the U.S. military, high levels, people associated with Lockheed Martin or Boeing or other major defense contractors who would get together to put together a UFO report on that level. And I think that would be a great idea.
That sounds like a great example
I would love
to
see
follow.
it. Yeah. In fact, I'm glad this person mentioned it because the Cometa report, we should come back to that for an episode.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, it's a very, very excellent report. It's been discussed, but I don't know, I think in the West, non-French countries anyway, it gets kind of forgotten.
So was that 1999?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the year. I saw someone was asking about the year.
So what else we have?
Sergeant Schill?
What about the Zamora case? Didn't his sighting resemble a Tic Tac? It did.
It did.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. There were some French cases as well.
Yeah. Oh, well, the Valençol case of 1965, you think, yeah, maybe.
Yep. No, some of them were reported like this. They really did. They're these sort of lightish in color, roundish, but oval shaped crafts. And I remember a picture from the Zamora case, and you probably do too. And that's generally the shape.
And just in case someone who doesn't know this, I'm sure there's some. So that was in 1964. Lonnie Zamora was a state trooper for New Mexico, saw an object, zoom over, thought it was a crashed airplane at first, drove up, pulled over, ran up this little hill and saw this, described it like as an egg-shaped object, but similar, right, to the Tic Tac. Thought it was an overturned automobile. I don't know what he's thinking. First airplane, then automobile. Who knows? He gets a little bit down the hill and sees two what look like children outside the craft. He gets a little closer and he realizes those aren't children. Those are non-humans. And it scared the heck out of him. And he took off momentarily. This is like with the Travis Walton incident where Travis's people got scared. They drove away and then came back. That happened with Lonnie Zamora. He came back.
But he was alone.
He was alone and just in time to see this egg-shaped or let's say Tic Tac shaped craft elevate itself up and take off.
If I remember correctly in that case too, it had, I want to say legs, but it had
Right. It was on landing pods.
gear, right?
Mhm.
And so the Tic Tac, I mean, no one saw it on the ground, but it is reported having those little something visible on the bottom, right?
Kind of like little T-Rex arms below it. That's what they look like to me.
Oh my God.
No, right.
So Sergeant Schill says, I grew up close to
Ellsworth. Yeah. It's also nuclear armed ICBMs. Good point. Good point. That whole part of the country, there's a lot of nukes under the ground. I was trying to ask myself, what was Ellsworth's situation in 1953 vis-a-vis nukes? And I actually didn't research that part of it. So it's possible, though. I know, like out there, Malmstrom's out there in the Great West and Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota. These are nuclear facilities as well. Malmstrom's out in Montana, but still out in the Great West. So yeah, Ellsworth, good point on that.
They have incredible planes there, though. I saw something about some new, I forget what they were called, but some new stealth planes that they were getting this year or in 2020. Can
I read this next one here? This is a good question. Mr. Dolan, during your research into Truman, did you obtain any insight into his personal thoughts on the shoot them down order in 1952, especially as he had to hand over control to Eisenhower? Okay, so that's a great question. And it's a hard one to answer, but it's a great question. So I'm going to give it my best shot. First of all, in Truman's memoirs, which have been published in 2 volumes, as you might imagine, flying saucers do not appear at all in them. It's as if they've just never happened. And we know damn well that Harry Truman was very interested in these flying saucers. One of the things that I've mentioned many times is that starting in the summer of 1948, and we have this on excellent authority, Harry Truman began receiving quarterly briefings on UFOs from Colonel, later General, Robert B. Landry. Landry was a U.S. Air Force officer summoned by Truman in 1948. This is right after the incredible Eastern Airlines encounter of July. And he directed Landry to coordinate with the CIA, with Central Intelligence. CIA was brand new at this time, to get reports to brief the president on a quarterly basis of UFOs. And according to Landry said this toward the end of his life in an interview he gave in the 1970s, he briefed Truman quarterly until the rest of Truman's presidency. So that's January 1953. So by my reckoning, you're talking 16 to 18 briefings. Wouldn't you love to be a fly on the wall of any one of those briefings where Landry is talking to Truman? Now, one thing Landry said to the interviewer, this whole question caught him off guard. Like I read the whole transcript of this interview, and it was an oral history interview. And they're talking about, all the conventional stuff, the Berlin airlift and the early Cold War. And then this interviewer at the end says, oh, what about UFOs? And you could see, like reading the transcript, Landry was not expecting this question. And he stumbled around a little bit, but he ended up saying a few things, which was, yes, I briefed Truman quarterly on this. And then he quickly said, but, we didn't find anything of significance. He said the president, like any citizen, was interested in all of these reports about these creatures. He actually mentioned beings. I'm like, wow, Landry, that's pretty amazing. But he said, no, we didn't come up with anything that was, earth-shattering. Can I have that water over there?
Yeah.
You can just hand that to me. Thank you. I just want to finish this thought. Thank you. Now, what we know is from 1948 to the end of 1952 was UFOs hot and heavy in the United States. And Truman, we know in the summer of 52, and this is from Ruppelt, who wrote about it. Landry appears in Ruppelt's book. So, and he, during the summer of 52, when all that activity was happening in DC, Ruppelt was sent down there to show you how important they thought he was. He had to get around on bus. Like, clearly Ruppelt was not, like, he was just there for show. I think the real investigation was going on elsewhere. But Truman
Right.
was listening in
Mm-hmm.
on a conversation Ruppelt had with Landry
Mm-hmm.
that summer. So Truman was interested. Now, the whole shoot them down thing, I would direct anyone who's interested in this to go check out the interview I did recently with Frank Fascino on the Flatwoods Monster case. Frank and I we actually did 3 interviews. 2 of them are on YouTube, one of them on Flatwoods and one of them on the whole shoot them down thing. And I have to say, Frank really delved into this more than anyone else I know. But one thing that we don't have is a direct statement by Truman. What definitely appears to be the case is that in the summer of 52, all through 52, the U.S. military was dealing with what sure as heck looked like a UFO invasion. I don't know how else to put it. These things were being seen everywhere, military, non-military. This was a serious issue. We have talked about this a lot. And so it's relevant that the Rapid City case of 53, it actually occurred, it was sandwiched between 2 big waves of sightings. 1952 was a huge year. 1954 was a big year, especially in Europe, but also to some extent in the US.
Mm-hmm.
And, 1952 was a very recent memory.
I also learned that 1953 was big in Canada, in North Bay. So that's something I hope to look into in a little while. I was talking
Yes, we were just talking with a Canadian researcher.
Michel Deschamps.
Yeah.
Who has...
Great guy.
Yeah, he's got archives on his website, but we're going to be digging into that a little bit because we're very curious about that. But I believe that was 1953.
Yeah, we should go through his website. It's a really fine site. Do we remember the name of that site? Just look up his name, Michel Deschamps. It's French name. He's in northern Ontario, near North Bay, I believe.
Yeah.
And he has got a very fine website.
If I can find it really quick.
In any case, well,
okay, that's okay.
I don't think you're going to find it. Tracey likes her tabs open.
Oh yeah, he's on me about the tabs. But hey, I'm looking into all these different things. I'm sure some of you are tab people. We like our tabs, right? We go back and forth between.
That would be an interesting thing to find out.
We're looking into.
Do you do a lot of tabs or not a lot of tabs?
Do you focus on one thing, or do you focus on?
I try to limit my tab output on my screen. That's just me. Sometimes it gets a little out of control. There is Michel Deschamps.
Yeah, but I'm looking for his.
That's his Facebook.
Northern Ontario UFO research
and study.
Where is it?
Northern Ontario UFO research and study.
So it's called Noufors. Noufors.
Yeah, we can't share the page because that's your screen. But anyway,
yeah, we can't do that. But okay, was there anything else you wanted to say about Truman and add to that story? Not really. Okay. I saw someone in there said you should interview James Fox, and we plan to. He has a new film coming out in the new year, and he was telling us about it just when we were hanging out, and it sounds amazing. And he promises that there's going to be some footage that nobody has ever seen before, and he's put more into this film than anyone he's ever done.
Yeah, we had a long conversation with James, and he is very excited about this film.
Yeah.
I think we can say that.
Yeah. So, yeah, we're excited about that.
And
whenever we can, we're going to talk to him, and you'll probably interview him.
All these questions on tabs. Check this out. All these people here writing. I'm a tab guy. I think
40
the tabs win. The tabs win.
That was like
I think I lose.
The tabs are great. That's what they're there for, right?
It just makes me crazy. I see so many tabs on the screen, like I lose my place.
Kirsten's with you, 5 tabs max.
Yeah, I'm like, hey, like make a commitment. Like, I feel like too many tabs.
I'm committing to many things.
Too many tabs. It's like I feel that's not making a commitment. I'm like, am I done with you, tab? Good, goodbye. I don't want you in my life anymore. Got too many things to worry about. If I need you back, I'll find you. That's my attitude.
Right. But when you have to multitask in all these different facets of your life, right?
I'm like, see ya, wouldn't want to be.
You can't always finish it, so you don't want to go look for it again. Anyhow,
alrighty.
You guys know what I'm talking about.
I think we're kind of wrapping it up here. The time is about 20 after. We've been going about 80 minutes. I think we're probably good. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we're good. Just want to thank you all so much for being here. This is so funny. I'm in between my reader glasses, so I go back and forth, and I try to see sometimes what you guys are saying is really difficult.
It's actually, it's sad. It's comical, but it's also tragic. So you're either a 1.75 or a 2. And so when you look at
it's a funny thing at this exact distance. This is why I wear my glasses in my hair all the time, because I can't see anything up close without them. So I just need to have them available.
You think it's her signature look, but it's actually she needs to have them with her.
I need my glasses. So anyhow,
you've got amazing distance vision, but your close up.
Yeah, I'd be a good spotter, but up close, no. Anyhow, I can see all these people here who are regulars. Thanks for showing up. It's so great seeing you all. We haven't done a live show in a while, and it's just really nice to be here. Really nice to see you all.
For sure.
The chat family. And welcome to all the new people. I hope you got some interesting information out of this. And we just wanted to show the connections to the current case. There are all these historical connections that are super interesting.
We have many more. I've been hunting down
so
a lot
many
more cases, so we'll be sharing them with you in the weeks to come. I'd like this as a little mini theme.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, if you guys
Well,
don't
no,
mind.
I mean, the reason why we came up with this was because we were saying, let's take what's relevant right now. You know, the Nimitz encounter is so important to everyone, but let's look at the older parallels
and
to
if
the
I can
current case, you know.
Exactly. And just to tie this together, okay? If the military really wants to pretend that they don't know what these things are, right? How realistic is it? They've been dealing with this for over 70 plus years, right? They know full well what is happening here. It's very likely they don't have every single answer. No one does.
Right.
No one's ever got all the information they want. So I'm sure within the intelligence community, the military, there's things that they do not know that they would like to know. And maybe that's an inhibitor for them, one of many, to prevent them from loosening up and talking about this. Okay, we get it. You don't know everything you want. But you've known for a long enough time that these things should not exist. They do things that we don't understand how they do it. That 180-degree turn, I'd like to know how tight a turn that was, but certainly the impression one gets from going through that information is that it was a super tight 180-degree turn, like something that they did not have the ability to do. The diving, the altitude changes, the speed in the Japanese case of the object, tracked at least on radar, 1,200 miles per hour. The Gulf of Mexico case I was going to get into, that thing was at over 5,000 miles per hour in 1952, and we will come back to it. And there was a visual sighting to go with that. It was like a streak, but the pilot and his crew did see it. That was a military case.
In the Ellsworth case, I just want to say, I believe I saw in Brad's report that they were estimating speeds around 960 miles an hour.
Is that okay?
I wish I had the report. I left it downstairs.
Oh, I was looking for speeds in some of that, and I wasn't finding estimates.
So almost 1,000.
But Sparks estimated that
in 1953. So.
Right. So that's off the charts in terms of speed. I mean, it's not incomprehensible scientifically, but in terms of the known technology, it is.
Right. And
absolutely.
I just want to mention one more thing, because we're always looking at this externally, at all of these external things that we can observe. But then there's how this is affecting all of these people in the military, these pilots. I mean, we're just telling the story, but if you think we think about what it's like for them, they're seeing something that is outside of anything that they have learned about. And they are the ones that are supposed to be defending the country and
getting scared.
Right. And they're supposed to be on the top end of all of the knowledge about this. And they are unnerved and have been unnerved. And so there's so many of them that have had these accounts over all of these years. And, some of them who we've met are clearly traumatized by some of this. It can be. And it's not just people in the military, of course. It's it's all sorts of people who have sightings and experiences, but they are engaging these targets. In the
TV show Blue Book, which last year aired, and they did the whole thing on the Gorman encounter. Which they gave it a different name. I can't remember, but
the Gorman dogfight.
Yeah, I can't remember the name they gave the guy in the show, but the actual name was Thomas Gorman. And in the series, they had that pilot kind of lose it in the aftermath.
Right.
And that was a bit over the top for that case. But the fact is that Gorman was shaken by it. And the fact is that these pilots that we're talking about in Rapid City, they were shaken.
Right.
The fact is that a lot of pilots and a lot of military personnel are shaken by the events that they encounter. Like that's all for real.
Right. And we
That
don't always
really
account
happens.
for that when we're telling the stories of this.
No.
I just want to
There's an emotional impact
mention
there.
it. Yeah.
Very powerful. Okay, so I think we may not do a live show next week, but we may have a pre-record ready. We're going to try.
That's right. Pursuing X.
We're going to drop the my Jimmy
little
Church thing.
Funny. That's right. If you didn't see the Jimmy Church interview, you can see the video I took of him when he was doing it and some of the behind the scenes.
It's not all funny. It's an actual genuine interview.
It is.
So I just want to point out.
But we just left in some of the
we had fun
commercials.
Between the breaks.
Between the breaks. So I think that's going to go up on Tuesday. And again, if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. If you want to know what's going up, turn on notifications and you will get an email whenever we upload something new. So while we're away, because we will be away next week, it'll be a perfect opportunity to try out notifications. So
yeah, we've got a few things. I'm actually trying to build up a few things. Haven't done a fresh Richard Dolan show in a while, but I think we're going to have one of those set up as well. I've got a good interview and a couple of people I really want to do interviews with in the near future. So
can we just talk a teeny tiny bit about that, who that is that you're going to be interviewing?
Yes, by all means.
There is a new movie coming out, which we were able to screen.
Yeah, we saw the screener. It's called
Witness of a New World.
Witness to Another World, I think,
Witness
wasn't it?
to
Alan Stivelman.
Yes.
Spanish. We met him before.
Uh-huh.
He interviewed me for Spanish television, which was pretty cool.
At Contact in the Desert, yeah.
He made a really cool documentary.
He did.
I got to say, it's like a really, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It's about a Mexican man who at age 12 in 1978, he's in there not a lot of money. He's out there and he's on a horse. He's out to
rural area, I believe,
to check on the fields, and he encounters these balls of light. And it's a very kind of intense situation. There may be a craft involved. Jacques Vallée investigated this way back in the day and pointed out that this, within a mile radius, there were 3 of these types of sightings at the same time on the same day, I think.
Right. Don't tell them any more about the movie.
No, but anyway, it's a modern documentary where Alan interviews this witness who, speaking of being traumatized, like I think it's fair to say, he was very deeply affected by this. And the film goes to this nice path of exploring what happened. It was really well done. And so I'm going to interview Alan this week, we think, and we'll air that interview. We'll talk about that case. I think that'll be kind of
it's unique because it really follows one case.
Yeah.
And the person who went through this and their whole, sort of their whole life. So it's completely different. It is beautifully shot. It's beautifully done. The story is told in this pretty unique new way. And I really think a lot of you will like it. I know I had some, it was emotional.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, we sometimes forget that this is a subject, this is an experience that affects people at a very profound level. Emotionally, how do you deal with something that you don't know how to explain it? You don't know how to process it. And then the entire rest of the world essentially dismisses it and laughs at you over it. Like, it's a really hard thing for people to deal with. And it happens all around this world, all around the world. And it happened to this man in Mexico, among many, many others. But I think we liked it because it shows a bit of a healing process. I think that's not giving away too much.
Right.
And I think it was a really well done film.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll talk about that.
Yeah. So I think that will be for the Richard Dolan show. And so do you plan on doing 2 parts, part 1 and part 2?
Yeah, I guess. Well, we'll see how it goes organically, but yeah, I don't see why not.
Okay.
I'll definitely do a standard 50-something minute interview with him. And if we can get more, I'll get more. We'll record more. So we'll see how that goes.
Sounds like it was an interesting journey. So it would be really nice to get a second part.
Is that everything? I think we're good.
We're good.
We talked about subscribe, smash the like button, hit the notifications,
Right.
etc.
There's a newsletter. I will say it's true. It's very long, but we try to put out everything. We try to give you everything we put out. So it's one way of tracking what the heck we're doing. So the first half is all of the stuff that's released publicly. The second half is everything that's released to the member site. But there is lots of free stuff on there. So
it's almost like we feel bad because it's so long. Like we worked so hard to make it so long every week or two when we put it out there. But oh well.
But if you think you've signed up and you haven't got them, I'll just tell you, we sent it out late at night this past Sunday, Eastern time. In case you want to check your inbox, check your spam, check your promotions. For a lot of people, it ends up in promotions. So just so you know when the last time it was sent out.
All right. I think we're now done. 90 minutes.
It's funny. I always feel like there you all are, and feel like we're just leaving the room,
it's leaving the party. The party, and like you can't say goodbye. But we're going to say goodbye because our producer, who we don't really have a producer here in this room, the mythical producer, is saying, "End it now." 90 minutes. We're good.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Hope you all have a great night. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you really soon.
We'll do this as soon as we can. Have a good night, everyone. Later.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.